very, very warm welcome to you all this morning on board this wonderful yacht, Accenture Interactive Yacht, Acama. We're going to have a great session this morning looking at how CMOs are leading for future growth. I'm going to introduce our panellists in a second, so a very warm welcome to them as well. I'm Mari McEwen. My background was in marketing with Unilever and PepsiCo. And then I started a company called Brand Learning. We became part of Accenture 2 years ago. And I'm now leading the marketing domain within Accenture consultancy team. So that's sort of what I'm doing. My job this morning is to let these wonderful people share their collective experience over many, many years. And also to make sure that they finish on time and that you finish on time. So I know everybody's really, really busy. Huge thank you to our colleagues at Accenture Interactive for hosting us on this wonderful yacht. Do we have anybody that is a boating expert on board? Anybody know there? No boating experts. Okay. Well, it's a Benetti yacht. It is about 35 meters in length, 7 meters wide, 240 tons. That's quite a weight. Just how I felt after eating the food on board last night. But we have got the yacht for the next hour. Please do take time afterwards if you want to just have a little look round. You're very welcome to stay for some refreshments if you're not dashing off for the next session. So just want to do a bit of a warm-up. I think there were a few parties last night. I saw a few dark glasses. I can still see a few dark glasses, actually. Morning, Nina. So we're just going to do a bit of a warm-up. So if you haven't been on a boat before, I think you'll be able to answer this very easy. So first of all, what do we call the sharp end of a boat? Anybody know what we call the sharp end, pointy end of the boat? Bow. Well done, that man. And this end, where we are now, the blunt end? Stern. Oh, they're sharp, this lot. You're going to have to watch this. Very sharp. So, OK, next one's a bit harder. So, port. Is it on the right or the left? Left. Very good. Cocky. So, OK, very easy. So, point to it. Yeah, exactly. So it's on the left if you're facing towards the bow. If you're facing on the stern, other way around. So, look, let's get started. What we're going to do, I'm going to first of all just introduce our panellists and tell you a little bit about who they are, and then we're going to have the chance to ask some questions, and then hopefully you will also get a chance to ask some of yours. So will you think about those as we're going so that we don't get to the end and then you sort of haven't got your questions. So really think about that. It's a fantastic opportunity. So first of all, welcome to Sil. Sil is the global CMO at Diageo. She's also a non-exec on the board of Domino Pizzas. And prior to that, she spent time looking after, I think it was 3,500 bars, pubs and restaurants at Allied Domecq, at Holson Burns, if I've pronounced that correctly. And prior to that, at P&G and Gillette.
We always called it Gillette.
Okay. We relate to that. Sil's also got an MBA from Harvard, so we're really looking forward to your experience, and thank you, Sil, for sharing that. So a big warm welcome to Sil Sala from Diageo. And next on our panel this morning, we have Nina. Morning, Nina. So Nina is CMO for O2 Telefonica in the UK, also a non-executive on the board of Barratt Developments. She's a council member for the Marketing Group of Great Britain, a board member for the Marketing Society, and I should have said, Sil, you're the president of the Marketing Society, so we've got a real experts from the marketing community here. Also, previously, Nina was the CMO for Barclaycard globally, and she was SVP Marketing at Intercontinental Hotel Group. And she also spent 9 years at Diageo, where I believe you worked together. Is that right? Yeah. And also, another bright cookie has her MBA here from France, from INSEAD. So welcome to Nina Bibby. Big warm welcome. And last but not least, we have John, our very own John Zealey, head of the Global Customer Insight and Growth Practice at Accenture. John has supported a wide range of consumer and retail organisations for more than 20 years. I won't say how many more than 20 years, but quite a lot more. He had hair when he started. So before he saw the light, he was a consultant at McKinsey. And he's also an alumnus of P&G, going way back as well, so lots more connection. John's also an advisory board member for cancer research and a non-executive for which, and he has an MA from Cambridge. So we've got a very, very bright crew. So a very warm welcome to John as well. So, bit of context before we kick off, everybody. So we've just completed a new piece of research with 900 global CEOs and CMOs on a really hot topic at the moment that you'll see a lot around Cannes, which is what is the future of marketing? It's a question that's on a lot of people's minds. We're going to be sharing the detail of that research tomorrow at a session we're running with the Marketing Society at the Channel 4 Villa. But we have got copies of the research report on your chairs, so you can take one. If one's gone, please feel free to take one at the back as well. So what we're going to look at today is a little bit more of what's the implications of that research in practice. What does that mean if you are a CMO leading a company and trying to set the agenda for that leadership? So 90% of the people interviewed agreed that marketing will change fundamentally in the next 3 years. So not just small changes, fundamental. So if you're at the helm of an organisation, what do you do? And essentially 3 key themes have come out of the research that CMOs need to do if they are to be not just relevant, but hyper-relevant to customers in future. So we're going to take each of those 3 themes and we're going to explore that with the help of our panellists and just get their real practical experience on what that means for them. Okay, so ready to kick off. So the first theme was about reinventing brands, propositions, and entire organisations. Both sorting your current operation so that you can run the business of today and investing to organise so that you are able to invent the new sources of growth in the future. So the now and the new and how you balance all of those things. So, Sil, I'm going to kick off with you first. So, Diageo has been on quite a journey for the last 5 to 6 years. Your iconic and long-standing CEO, Paul Walsh, stepped down. Ivan stepped up. Massive disruption in your business, huge new trends, and essentially significant disruption from all angles hitting you. Tell us about Diageo's reinvention and why do you need to reinvent and what role are the marketing function and you as CMO playing in that?
Thanks, Mary. I really like this study. I would encourage everyone to read it. And it describes the CMO as the architect of the future organization, which I think we have to be. I mean, I in no way take credit for the changes, all the things we've achieved at Diageo. I have an amazing team. But I hold myself accountable for those changes. And they have been big. It would probably take all morning to describe them. So let me just give you a feel for a few. One of the things we did was to go out in the future and just have a vague idea of where we might need to be in 5 years. But I promise you, if you try to get there all at once, it's just not going to work, or at least not across an organization that spans 180 countries and 1,200 marketers. So we called our first stage of reinvention Next Generation Marketing 1.0. And maybe my biggest contribution was naming it 1.0 because I had a sense that there would be more. And it was a lot about the fundamentals. But then it went on to include all the things that you might expect. There was massive organizational change, which I'm happy to talk about. We had to develop new capabilities. We have a world-class measurement program. And we have, to balance that, because you can go overboard, no pun, on measurement, but really with programs that spur our creative strengths on. The world is changing. I won't bore you with all the changes in the alcohol industry. One of them is people in some countries are drinking less. We think that's fine. We encourage responsible drinking. But for us, what it means is, okay, where do we play in that space? And when you go out, how often do you maybe not want to have an alcoholic drink, or you're driving and Coke just isn't going to do it? So we started up a new startup business called Distill Ventures, and Distill Ventures seeks all kinds of different companies, but with a big emphasis on the non-alc space, and says, you entrepreneurs can probably invent faster and quicker than we can, and allows us to place lots of bets. And one of the most prominent ones is Seedlip. If you've ever heard of Seedlip, yes, I'm seeing some nods. In almost all the Michelin-starred restaurants in London, I'm always saying to Ben, the founder, how do you do this? Because his abilities are quite incredible. So when you have to go into new spaces like that, you don't go, okay, let me see if I can compete with the giants that are Coca-Cola and Pepsi. I mean, they do what they do it well. That's not our gig. But a 28-pound bottle of non-alc spirits, that's ours. And Seedlip has been the best-selling spirits brand in Selfridges, for example, and that's of all spirits brands, all of them. So things like that we try to stay ahead of, but we try to stay ahead of with new org structures and as well as moving our processes ahead generally to become faster. And I'm happy to talk more about that as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sil. And we'll come back and explore that a little bit more. Thank you. So, Nina, so you have a very different business to Sil. So a single brand, handset, network connection at its core, very competitive. Not that Sil's is not competitive, but hugely competitive industry. People making decisions to switch contracts after as long as 24 months with you. Highly regulated market. Interested to hear whether you think any of those themes that Sil has mentioned resonate with you, and are there any big differences for what you're seeing at Telefonica?
Yeah, I think the theme Sil raised definitely resonate. I think the big difference in my sector is we are a subscription business. And that comes with heightened accountability. We have direct access to customers. We have direct provision to customers. They expect an end-to-end customer experience that works and that's relevant because we know them. And that direct access and those heightened expectations, I think, is much different. And what it means is that defining and delivering the end-to-end customer experience is not done by marketing alone. I mean, far from it. The delivery of the brand happens across the entire company. And that's true, by the way, for most service businesses. So it's not unique to O2. When I used to work in hotels, we would say that the strength of the brand, and whether that was Intercontinental or Holiday Inn or Crowne Plaza, whichever the brands, but the strength of the brand was as much due to what marketing said as it was due to the provision of the service, the delivery of the service by that 18-year-old clerk working the night shift in Knoxville, Tennessee. He had as much to do with the brand as we did in marketing. And that's a fundamental difference, I think, between our two worlds. And I think for the role of marketing, what it means is, in some ways, marketing has to start internally. We have to inspire our people because they are all delivering the brand. And if we can't inspire our own people, we don't stand a chance in hell of inspiring our customers. So I think that flip has been, and that difference between the two has been really important in the role of the CMO in that.
Great. Thanks, Nina. Brilliant. So now, John, over to you. So John, you're a marketer by background, but then moved into the heady world of Accenture and saw the sort of leading edge of technology and what's coming down the road. And that's obviously one of the main enablers of disruption. So what do you think are some of the main technology-driven challenges and opportunities that you see coming down the line, not just for marketers, but for their agencies and consultancy partners as well?
That's huge, and I've got a minute, but I'll do my best. I think the most exciting thing is, there's never been a better time to be a marketer. When I started out in the mid-'80s, you could have all sorts of wonderful ideas. We did really exciting things with DAS. Do you know DAS? Anyone know DAS? We did the first 4-sheet posters ever for Procter & Gamble because we worked out that DAS users stand at bus stops, whereas Purcell users and Ariel were driving past in their cars. But, so you can have fun. I think the main thing, therefore, about technology is there's never been a better time to actually roll up your sleeves and get stuck in. Because a lot of things we used to guess at, we can now know. I love your point about the end-to-end experience. You can have that with chaos, but actually the reality is you've got to know it. And so, that I think is the big challenge, actually delivering the promise. And we still have a few marketeers who are a little bit Luddite, not fully embracing, and I think we've all got to collectively work on that. Because at the end of the day, if you don't, who saw the Economist title of sort of data is the new oil? Yeah, data is the new oil. Yeah, but you've got to have pipelines, you've got to have refineries, you've got to have gas stations or petrol stations. And I think for all of us as marketers, we've actually got to work out, if data is the new oil, how we actually put in place the infrastructure to make it work. So that's the big challenge, I think.
So thanks, John. So we've talked a bit about reinvention in general terms, in terms of the different industries. But if we look at what it means for the leadership challenges involved, start with you, Nina. So you've worked across 4 completely different industries. So we've got BevAlc, we've got financial services, travel and hotel, and what have I missed off? Financial services, hotel, telecoms, of course. Sorry. It was a late night last night. So I'm really interested to hear how different has your role been as a CMO across those different industries, or is it broadly the same?
Yeah, so I guess it's most basic, and this is really basic. So our role in marketing is to generate sustainable demand, right? Basically, that's what we do. Now, the interesting bit is how we do it. And I think if you look at different sectors, that the different sectors provide the context to what sustainable demand might mean, sector by sector, and the steps to getting there. I could talk a lot about those differences. I don't think we have time. But if I look at the role of the CMO in those sectors, I think we're all facing levels of disruption that are unprecedented across just about any industry I can think of. And so in that context, and in the context of what we're there to do as marketeers, I think the role of the CMO is to provide leadership through that disruption and to help the organization focus on and prioritize the biggest things that are going to help us connect with our customers. And that is regardless of sector, Mari, I think.
And still, your role, again, we talked, is very different. So global CMO, multiple brands, thousands of marketeers across the world. How has your leadership role changed, and what are some of the main challenges that you're personally grappling with?
Diageo's results, which are very strong, have been driven by this interesting combination of making big strategic choices, say, more investment in North America, our biggest, most profitable markets, moving the investment around, which accelerates the top line, but also enhances our gross margin. At the same time, like many companies, we're on a cost adventure. And that means that that if you ask the Diageo team where they're staying this week, they will tell you about the worst Airbnbs they have ever stayed in. And we play games like, oh, you think your place is bad? Somebody says, yeah, well, my bed is a twin bed shoved up against the wall, and somebody else says, you have a bed? So we save money that way. So you'd think, well, that's pretty miserable for everybody. But it's not. Because guess what? We're putting most of that money right back into the brands. We save most of our money through our Catalyst program, which is our marketing effectiveness program. It is the thing the city loves the most. It is the thing that our executive loves the most. To be able to say, we know what's returning and what's not, and we're still experimenting. So those types of structural changes have meant big changes in my leadership. I think the other thing that has changed for me is just becoming more confident. Most of my experience has been in turnarounds, right? Oh, this business is really broken. Maybe the leadership before wasn't very good. I have to come in and fix it. Fine. Let's see, what shall I do? I can't fix this. Let's assemble a great team. The magic isn't very difficult to figure out. However, in the case of following Andy Fennell, who was a great CMO, I found that really daunting. If you've met Andy, he's smart, he's articulate, he's an excellent marketer. That was difficult. So what's changed for me personally is just a growth in confidence and an ability to set a direction and trust my instinct.
Thanks, Sil. And John, you're not going to get off lightly here. So Accenture's also going through its own reinvention. I think it's on the acquisition trail, 80 plus acquisitions, I think, counted up. So how is Accenture reinventing itself? And also, what are some of the leadership challenges that you're personally facing in that journey?
My word. Well, if we are in France, so it takes a moment to mention Pierre, rest his soul, who departed in January, but was, I think, the architect of what we're enjoying here today. And if it wasn't for folks like Brian, and we've got a few, I can catch a few eyes in the room. I think you need to have visionary leadership and step out. And that's what we had from Pierre. I think our collective challenge is that we don't want to reinvent the holdco model. The holdco model has been done. It's been done very well by other people. We need to invent a whole new model. We need to invent a model of joined up thinking, which is what we've always been good at. And of course, the leadership challenge for us in that is we've got some amazing acquisitions which have amazing secret sauce and individuals. So we don't want to do anything to dilute that. On the other hand, we've all got to go to clients together. We have a little phrase called seamless badgeless squads, which if you're British and you think of the SBS, the Special Boat Service, you think, that's a little aggressive. Is that really what we're going after? I think it's the Navy SEALs would probably be the best description. So, that's our challenge. We are better together. I hope there are no Scots in the room, but we are better together. And what we've got to do is to make sure we lead with the total story without diluting the secret sauce. We term the phrase culture of cultures, and we're doing our best on that. But I won't do a show of hands at this precise moment. But certainly that's where we're headed. Thanks.
Great, thanks, John. So let's move on a little bit now. We've talked about the first key theme of reinvention. The second key theme that came out was actually quite surprising. It was the thought of rejection. When you first think, what does that mean, rejection? But it's about rejecting old ways of working, old orthodoxies, old mindsets, ways of thinking and working that were suited for the business that we used to be in the past, as opposed to the businesses, the organisations that we need to be in going forward. Being open to the need for new talent, new capabilities, new cultures as well. So again, Nina, just start with you again this time, but what have you had to stop doing and change? What old ways of working have you rejected and why?
I think to be frank, probably the biggest change we've had to contend with, and I'll answer your question, but I might come around a bit. Our biggest change is that mobile phones are a comparatively young sector. And we've had, frankly, years and years of easy growth. And that's not as true anymore. Now, on the one hand, growth in our industry continues to grow, continues unabated. I mean, the demand for data and airtime, good news, just continues to grow. Fantastic. But the difference and the challenge for us is how do we monetize that growth? And that's what's changing. And there's capabilities and ways of working that we have to adopt to get hold of that growth. And so culturally, that's really different for O2. We've always been a very customer-led and marketing-led organization. And our former CEO used to talk about us being a brand that runs a business and not vice versa. And our people are tremendously proud of our brand. I mean, and they absolutely believe that brand is fundamental to our success, which is great. But technology and capabilities around data, around decisioning, around orchestration are all becoming as important to our future growth, to monetize that growth I spoke about at the beginning. And that is a big difference for us. It's as we move towards, one of our suppliers calls it people-based marketing. So what it means is we have to tell a different story as marketing, certainly myself, internally, that it's not just about the big visible drivers of growth like new product launches, which we need to continue, but we also need to invest in those capabilities. And that's a hard story for us to tell in marketing, and it's a really hard story for the organization to hear. And to be frank, we're still in the middle of that, because what people want to hear is the big sexy stuff. What new campaign is coming, what new product launch is coming, and that all still has to happen. But I also say, but guys, there's also stuff we need to do which you won't see, but that's going to be as fundamental to our success as that, as well as changing the ways of working, as well as changing the KPIs. And so that's a whole different internal narrative that we're having to undertake.
Thank you, Nina. And still, I mean, Diageo has always prided itself on marketing excellence. I think you started maybe 20 years ago rewiring brand building in the way it was done across the organisation. Have you also had to reject old ways of working? And what does that mean to you as a CMO and working with your other colleagues around the board table as well?
Yeah, I'd say we have to do that in a number of ways. I'll talk about two of them. One is structure, and the other is speed, and they're highly interrelated. I really think it's up to CMOs to zero base their thinking around the organization, particularly if you're trying to both grow the top line and increase the bottom line sustainably. So, and they have an interesting interaction. So, one of the first things that I did was we had global, regional, and local marketing. And one of the first things I had to do, which was not easy, was take out the entire regional layer because it was making things too complex. You know, I would ask somebody on the global team what was happening in Brazil on Bailey's. And I knew there was a problem when the global person called the regional person, who called, you know, the marketing director, who didn't quite know, had to check with the brand director, who then went back up. And I was like, oh, this just has to stop. So yes, it did save costs, but it got across the message that, you know, Latin America doesn't really exist. Argentina, in terms of our portfolio, is very different from Chile or Brazil. So we have to think about things as markets. It was based on thinking that a whole bunch of thinking, but what I'd call old structural thinking, where you can't get great local talent. So you can't get great talent into the markets like Kenya or Nigeria or the Philippines. And to make the point that you can, we didn't have the local talent yet. I took our three most high-profile talented marketers and sent them to Lagos and Nairobi. To make the point that these local markets and the talent that we have there are really, really important. So there were structural changes that enable speed, because I think speed is everything these days. I mean, I'm hoping that if you live in one of the Six Nations rugby countries, you saw that the Guinness Six Nations sponsorship is going really well. But that creative was done in 10 weeks from signing the sponsorship to being on air, and we haven't done that kind of thing before. So that was that speed. We form agile teams. I know that's a really good buzzword right now, but it is working for us. So that combination of rethinking the structure. And oh, by the way, you know, the changes that we've had to make to our business model, getting more into our luxury business and prestige with high net worth individuals, more into experiences, which I'd love to talk more about. All that's done with the same headcount. And you can't just tell people to work harder. You have to zero base what they do to do the new things.
And thanks, Sil. And John, I think some of those themes might resonate with you in terms of the ways in which maybe Accenture also needs to change, and some of the rewiring and things that need to happen here. But just in terms of what are some of the old ways that you think need to go at Accenture, and why?
Well, where do we begin? No, I mean, I think we have a proud history of something which is orthogonal to most of the people in the room, which is waterfall and linear. And that just wasn't going to cut it, as we wanted to serve, you know, CMOs and, you know, people driving growth. That very sort of step-by-step approach, which was brilliant if you had millions and millions of pounds to spend or dollars to spend on an IT system, just doesn't meet the market. So, and it's a very good example. There'll be some Fjordians in the room where we actually took some of this spirit of Fjord, the design thinking, and reinvented our whole way of working under what we call form. So I think, taking your words, Sil, about agile, you know, we've had to reinvent the entire business. And that's also important because you can't team if you do linear and waterfall, because all you're doing is running a relay race or passing a baton, which is the whole co model, you know, Team Voda or Team Unilever or whatever, you know, John Rosetsky would have done, and Peter. But we've got to do a much more parallel thing. So I think big parallelism is where we're going, and also then all, you know, passing the ball between us. I don't know what any of us have got, you know, kids or folks we know watching 7-year-old football, where they run around the park chasing the ball, and most of the park is completely empty of anything except for grass. You know, we perhaps a little bit were like that. Now we've got to be playing, you know, the beautiful game where actually the players are spread around and the ball gets pitched up and Salah picks it up and, you know, puts it in the net. So, you know, we are trying to play the beautiful game.
Thank you, John. So, okay, so this rejection, we've heard what it means in your organisations. What does it mean in terms of the way that you work with your agency partners, your consultancy partners, your suppliers? I mean, what does rejection mean? Not obviously losing a pitch, but what does it mean? And what's changing? And how do your agency partners need to change to serve you better? So would anyone like to give a thought on that? Sil, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to see the model that John, you're talking about, Mari, we've talked about, and I've talked to your team about. I'd really like to see it work. What you are promising has been promised for many years, and at the end of the day, it comes down to performance, level of creativity, and how much it's going to cost us, and whether you really can do the integration. So one of the things I'm asking of our agencies, besides the usual, please put your very best people on our business, is please operate seamlessly for us. Because there are still agencies in the world where the office P&L drives a lack of collaboration. That ends up costing us more. We have not had a huge amount of success with putting in everything to one place and getting the level of talent we need across various specialisms. So if you can make it work, hooray. I mean, and the other thing I'd say is any of the issues we have with agencies are at least half ours. And we need to, and are constantly looking about who are we as a client and how do we become our agency partner's very best client. Are we listening to them? Are they listening to us? And that's, you can't underestimate the need to look at yourself before you look and you say, well, the agency.
Great, thanks, Celine. Nina, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Sil's points, and it's something that we're trying to figure out working with agencies as well. Is how do we move beyond silo thinking, both, by the way, internally and with our agencies. And so we've tried a number of things, and one thing I've talked a couple of times about, which I think is working, is we created a planning hub where we bring the planning leads from each of our agencies together, co-located in one neutral space, and they're there definitely 1 day a week, sometimes 2 days a week, without fail. And you walk into that space, and our briefs are all on the wall. They're sitting in agile teams, cross agile teams. Each team has a different lead depending what the brief is that they're working on. There's a massive energy when I walk in there and see that all happening, and that's ensuring that we're getting that integration, because it is hard, and I don't think just having one team can do it. One other thing, which I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this, so bear with me, but I think it's been really interesting, the types of marketeers we look for. So now this is where my age comes in, but in the good old days, we all wanted the uber generalist, and that was the brand manager, right? The brand manager was the complete generalist. And we've moved over time as new technologies and capabilities have come up, we've gone towards specialists, and I think that's right. But now that I'm trying to engineer different ways of working, I'm trying to bring together these different capabilities in new ways to make our marketing effective, to make it faster, to make it more effective. I'm finding I need those generalists again, because you need somebody who understands the whole picture to help put the whole picture together. So it's been very interesting as I reflect on the type of marketing leaders that we need to ensure we have in-house.
Yeah, great, Nina. And John, the other side of the table, right of response, but how do you see the very best sort of strategic partners, clients working with Accenture, and any learnings that you can share from that perspective?
I mean, you can take this at multiple levels. I mean, to be truly human, the best clients are the people who treat their agencies or their consultancies as humans. If you kick the cat because you can, it's remarkable you don't get the best people working on the account or working on the client. It's kind of human nature, but it's remarkable how few clients, in my experience, have really internalized that reality. But I think otherwise, I'm absolutely with you both. I mean, we're instilling a group of folks called the growth architects, who are our version of these generalists. I expect I might put them as more multi-specialists, in the sense that, you've got to be an expert in multiple different things now and then have the ability to architect it together. It's rather like if If you went to a doctor and he said, I'm a general doctor, I think you're looking fine. You'd say, well, actually, I'd rather have somebody who kind of understood the respiratory system and kind of understood this. I don't want somebody who sort of says you look kind of fine. So I think our challenge, and I throw it out to my colleagues in the room, is we've all got to be expert on everything which we do everywhere, but then have the ability to knit it together. And that's how I think we will add value. So if we have clients who will trust us, and then we have to step up by having multi-specialists who can architect it all together.
Great. And one thought just prompted by that, there's a lot of discussion about what do you do yourself, what do you get your agencies to do, you know, how do you get that balance right between insourcing, outsourcing? Has anybody got anything they would like to say on that? Any experience, any sharing of learnings on that? What's the right model? Or
There
there one?
is no right model. I mean, I think that is the main thing that everybody has to understand. I would start by saying, well, I think it would be hard to see a day when we ever would bring all of our, big on-air and digital communication all in-house. Because can we attract the very best creatives in the world? And then I hear, last year I was talking to the CMO at Spotify and listening to what they do in-house, and it's really, really interesting. But a single brand company is very different from trying to cover a couple hundred brands on 180 markets and do that in-house. So I think every company has to be really thoughtful over what we in-house and what we keep external. And the message to our agencies is really simple. If we can do it cheaper, faster, and better, we will. And that's the challenge. We don't want to, particularly, but we will. So I do think it's that simple, and having a really open conversation about that. If the digital supply chain is not transparent and the way we look at it can make it more transparent, we're going to do that.
Nina, any thoughts from you?
No, I just agree. It is cheaper, faster, better. We're certainly looking at what we can in-house that we're not already. I don't believe that we'll ever get to a stage where it's all in-house, because I think the creativity that agencies bring, because they're working with multiple clients in multiple sectors, is enormously important to us as a client. So I can't see us ever going the full hog.
I mean, I think what we observe is you've got to begin with the end in mind, a good old Coveyism, back in the day. I mean, we're doing some work for an organisation which had got multiple brands in multiple countries and multiple agencies, and it was a zoo, and the end in mind was to get some degree, not of one size fits all, but some degree of better, faster, cheaper, but it was impossible for them to do that in-house. Now, when that's completed, it might go back the other way. So I think the other thing is it's not one and done for the rest of your life. Work out what you're trying to achieve, get that thing done, and then think again. By the way, I love that planning hub. I apologise. I might well steal with pride.
Me too. Can we please talk some more?
Search and spin, steal with pride. Those little things which I picked up years ago from my time at Diageo, and you sort of think that's a really good hybrid model. You put people together, you rely on their best instincts to work together, and they won't disappoint you.
The only thing I would say, we also have our own planning leads in there as well, so to help sort of facilitate and guide it.
It's a hybrid. I love it.
Great discussion. Thank you. So look, we're going to move on to our third key theme that's come out of the research now. So if you've stopped doing things that are not working, how do you then rewire? How do you then put all of that back together so that you can deliver an outstanding and integrated customer experience across all of the different fragmented touch points that you've got? So John, you get to go first now. So wake up. So one big idea that came out of the research on rewiring was about the need for a more organic living business. So get out of the jargon. What does that actually mean? Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I think first things first, there's a lot of stuff in the press at the minute which is sort of, apologies, Sil, to you, is a bit engineering style, X.O or something, and you think that's fine, but actually at the end of the day we're working with consumers and customers, and they've got to be back at the sort of heart of the village, as Pierre would have said. We've got to actually put the church back in the heart of the village. And we thought that living was it's about the consumers, it's about the customers, and then using language which describes, basically organic processes. Don't worry, I'm not going there, but organic processes. And I think purpose purpose is at the heart of it, whether it's a purpose in terms of a CSR purpose, or whether the one I really love at the moment is in the pet food industry, where they're going from selling tins of unmentionable meat to actually, looking after the care of pets via insurance and animal hospitals and everything there. So I think the biggest challenge of living is, are you actually doing something which makes people really want to, attach yourself to your brand? I mean, and that I think is the big thing. I love the O2. I mean, the O2 does something. It instantiates what's otherwise a fairly, it's just a handset. But you go to the O2, you see, my God, this is a spirit. So you've got that, a spirit, I say. And then I think the innovation thing is important. I mean, the other thing which, all of us here have to breathe, I hope. If you're holding your breath this long, you're doing well. But you've got to be responding. Some of you put on shorts this morning. I decided you wouldn't want to be eye level to my hairy knees, but you're constantly responding.
Could be worse.
And you look at fast fashion, and they've been responding extraordinarily fast. I think the irony in my home industry is, although we always called it FMCG, the reality is it wasn't very F anymore. Well, it was F in some way, but it was F'd up, rather than necessarily being fast-moving. And so you've got to get the speed back in. I love Distill Ventures. I've been to visit them. That sort of sense of the real speed and going out and saying, if you want to be bought out by Diageo, how would you start designing your product from the get-go? That strikes me as smart and responsive in your context. I think we've got to get intelligence into all the experiences, so, it's not just a tin on a shelf. I love the White Walkers. The White Walker bottles, I don't know how it did commercially, but it certainly made me pay attention.
Fantastically.
Did it?
Yeah.
Right. The only sad thing in my house is that my son is not of a responsible age, and therefore I couldn't buy him one. But there you go. So, I mean, it's all around, and as soon as we mention it, there we go. And then we get to this bit about agility. I think, we saw this in the research, the CMOs who are architects of the firm's growth, I like the word accountability, who step up, they can make the difference. The CMOs who sit on their craft skills and wait for the world to come to them, not so much. So that agility is good. So that's what it's all about. And as usual, we have slogans and headlines, but that's what living business is all about, using human language to describe how we put the customer back at the centre of a business.
Thanks, John. So, Nina, so if we're a startup, it's pretty easy. We can kind of do it as we think we should. But if you've got an established organisation, we all know that big corporates can be slow, can be cumbersome, can be tied up. There's all sorts of regulatory and other constraints. So how do you go about rewiring in a company like that? And how do you change the culture of a business like that?
Wow, small question. So I think it's just interesting. So I think collaboration is a huge part of it. And we've talked about agile teams. I think that's absolutely right and dynamic. And we're trying to do that. We always had them for big things like iPhone launches. We always had these cross-functional agile teams who came together for the sort of few months before and worked that way. I thought, why can't we work that way all the time? Because we have that culture exists, that capability exists. So I think it is about collaboration, but which has always been true in some ways, right? But I think it's about hardwiring that collaboration into the organization. And that's really what I'm trying to do and work with my colleagues is how do we hardwire that in? And actually at all levels of the organization from the board down. So even at board level, we're starting to form these subsidiary groups that are cross-functional. So for example, we've now got a data and analytics board. That's got the CFO on it, it's got the COO on it, it's got myself on it, it's got the sales director on it, because we recognize that those capabilities and what we need to invest in cut across functions. So I think to your point about culture, you have to insert some things. And I think sort of, Sil, when you said you put people into some of those local markets, some of those symbolic gestures are really important. I know it's more than symbolism, but it really makes a point. If you want to change a culture, you've got to do it, and you've got to be able to demonstrate that that is the change that you are indeed making.
Great. Thanks, Nina. And so, Sil, Diageo share price, you said it's at an all-time high, so congratulations to you and your board colleagues for that. That can't have been easy, but what sort of culture change have you had to drive in Diageo to deliver those sorts of results?
Culture is always such a big topic. I guess I'd put it in the mindset category. So you mentioned regulation. We face regulatory changes all the time. One of the really dramatic ones that happened a few years ago. Imagine this: you're our marketing team in Turkey, and you're very good at marketing, actually. And all of a sudden, a new, more conservative government comes in, and prohibits you from any sort of marketing. And I mean any, not just on-air, posters, digital, but promotions, signage in store, signage outside the store. I mean, there was nothing that we could do. And the resilience and, mindset of that team allowed us to figure out how to keep our brands vibrant legally in that country. So it's a mindset and saying, oh, we're a regulated industry, the world's against us, is a big difference. Collaboration is massive. When I talk to other marketers and I hear about the internal fights, honestly, I could do an entire coaching business on how not to hate your supply chain. Because it's really simple. Marketing achieves almost nothing. I mean, maybe you could make some content, but marketing achieves nothing without the rest of the organization. So the idea of your boards is a brilliant idea. And my senior leadership team and I lead, and we try to instill this right the way down the organization. We don't lead a marketing agenda. We lead a Diageo agenda. And that is for the growth of our brands, the growth of our company, and the growth of our people. And you could say, but wait a minute, you have to be the voice of the consumer. You have to, pull your corner. Nobody else will. That's not what we found. What we found is, yes, we are respected for our marketing expertise. Yes, I occasionally tell someone to piss off when they tell me, what they think of the ad. It's very interesting. Here's my consumer data. I really don't care what you think. But I think the fact that we're leading for the company allows people to trust you. So when David Cutter, our supply director, and I are talking over, say, a re-engineering a product to make the cost better, I could look at it as he really wants a cheaper cost of goods and I need to maintain the quality. No, we both care deeply about the quality of this product. That is hardwired in both. There's total overlap in what we want. And seeing it from that perspective means you don't go into the discussion with any function like this. You go into it right. What's the outcome? Let's go.
Great. Thanks very much, Sil. So we're going to do one quick fire round, and then we're going to move over to you for your questions. So just start thinking about them. This is an unprecedented opportunity to talk directly to some very, very experienced and talented leaders here. So just have a think about that. We'll just wrap up this part by saying, what's the single piece of advice that you would give to any, let's say, customer-focused leader, rather than just a marketing leader, customer-focused leader who wants to transform a brand, a team, a business, an organization? What's your single advice? So, Nina, we'll start with you.
My single advice is don't be precious. If you want to change, that is going to mean probably, in all likelihood, letting go of some things that you yourself have implemented that have worked really well, that you feel very passionate about. But in order to drive change, you're going to have to. So be objective and be brave to let go of things.
Right. Thank you. Sil?
I'll go back to where I started. Set an ambitious vision for the future of your organization, your team, and your talent. And then stretch your people with the right level of ongoing coaching. I mean, I try to make every conversation a coaching conversation, but with a level of ongoing coaching that helps them achieve things that they never thought possible.
And John?
Hard to add to that, but I mean, I guess all I would say is make sure you are expert in your field, marketing or customer growth, but then ignore the boundaries and go on and captain for the team. And I think, we use the phrase team captain in our business. You use the word squads, and however we put it together, be an out there team captain for the consumer, and you'll almost certainly draw people with you, I think.
Thank you very much indeed. So you can just relax a second. Right, hard work. Now we're going to move to the group here. So who's got a question that they'd like to ask? One of our panel members. We've got some mics. There we go, Alice.
Hello panel, thank you so much. I really enjoyed those insights. My name's Alice, I'm from Deliveroo. I think we talk a lot about all of the successes that we have as leaders. I'd love it if you could share some of maybe a mistake that you've had and what you learned from it.
Alice? Oops.
Many of those.
It's all right, it's just the clock. Thank you.
It's a little story. I'll try to make it fast. My story is about learning to bring the organization with you. When I took over as the head of innovation, it was part of what we called at the time Destination 2011, and there were 5 big objectives we had to achieve, one of which was creating over £1 billion of net new revenue in 5 years from innovation, from zero. And I was in a leadership meeting, team building meeting, 110 people. And you know those clicker things that allow people to vote? We use them a lot in the Marketing Society. And the whole room got to vote on which of the confidence they had in how we would achieve each of those objectives. So grow our core brands, 80%, grow our luxury business, 83%, and it went on. Innovation was the last. How confident are we that we are going to achieve our innovation goals? And I watched that bar not rise. What was it? 18% of people had faith that we would achieve this goal. And every single head turned to me. Okay. I am now a complete failure as measured by the bar. But in that, I learned that in our rush to set up the function and get things going, I hadn't brought the organization with me. And that changed tack. So I did things like what you talked about, setting up a board for innovation, which had the regional presidents on it. And rather than everybody looking to the innovation team as if we were rent a new product, I pre-wired Paul, our CEO, to go around and say, Stuart, president of International, how are you doing on your innovation goals? And Ivan, who is president of North America, where are you? And what that did is that helped to get that shared ownership. And that's why I believe so much in engendering that right from the get-go in everything we do.
Well done, Sil. Nina.
So I have so many, so it's hard to choose, actually. I'll tell you what, it was a learning experience. So I had just changed sector from Diageo packaged goods into hospitality, so service industry. And very early on was given the opportunity of relaunching Holiday Inn. At the time, it was the biggest relaunch program. So it was $1 billion, 3,000 hotels in just about every country you can imagine. And it was right at the beginning, I thought, I've got this. I know how to do this, right? I was trained well, so I thought, let's look at the brand, let's understand the customer, what do they want, what's the case for change, what do we need to add to the customers, how do we want to redesign the brand, redesign the packaging, the logo, and the signage. I did all of that. I thought, okay, we're good to go. And then somebody, this is about 6 months later, said, what about the guest experience? And I'm like, good point. So I had completely overlooked because I had worked in an experience company before. And so the mad scramble then to pull that together, to get the right people in the room, to educate myself, to really, put my hands up and say, I don't have a clue here what I'm doing, which wasn't easy when I was still only just 6 months in, to try to then get back on top of it and actually do the relaunch. So that's probably mine.
Thanks, Nina. John?
I'm going to say likewise. I could have. Which one do you want? I think the key thing is as marketing leaders, you've got to be out there. You've got to lead with confidence. You've got to lead with the chin a lot of the time. But then you get it wrong. And I think the key thing is having, what's the sign? The sign of a strong mind is someone who changes their mind in the light of new information, as opposed to being rigid. And I think this is beyond the statute of limitations still, so I mentioned this. About 15 years ago, when I was last looking after Diageo, we ran some of your websites for you. It was a disaster at that time, because we tried to use SAP skills to work with the marketing department. Not going to work. And so what I learned was that, and hence why I'm so passionate about everything we have here in Accenture Interactive and my area, is you've got to serve the customer the way the customer wishes to be served. And we learnt it the hard way, but we picked ourselves up and off we go, and we learnt from new information.
Great, thanks, John. So, other questions? Who's got a question for us? Come on, hands up. Wasn't that bad last night? Come on, be brave. Go on, Tim. Thank you, Tim.
Tim Holbert from Barclays. Hi, thanks very much for the panel. Okay, working? Sorry, Tim Holbert from Barclays. Lots of conversation about collaboration and sounds really easy. How do you motivate teams that are rewarded and recognised in different ways to perhaps just put their egos aside and gift to other people in the organisation? What have you found works with that?
So I'll start because I want to just call out the first thing you said, Tim, which it's not easy. Because if you're not set up to do so. So if you've got a structure that isn't conducive to it, if you've got targets that aren't conducive to it, if you've got cultural norms and role models that are not conducive to it, if all of those things are not about collaboration, then I don't think collaboration is easy. So that was the first thing I would say. And I think then, so therefore the flip is, we talk about KPIs. Actually, those should be KPIs within marketing. When we look at our monthly dashboard, I want everybody to comment on other areas, not just their own areas, because we own that together. And then when we go to the board level, once at the board level, back to your point, Sil, it's about the success of O2, not marketing's role in that. So I think it has to start with role modeling, how we talk, and also with those KPIs, those objectives, joint projects, and again, hardwiring in collaboration, which is creating those cross-functional teams or boards which demonstrate that this is the way we'll do business. In fact, it's the only way we'll do business.
I think it's, far less is actually driven by KPIs than subtly what messages people get and who people think have power over their careers. So having I'm constantly messaging on collaboration and the importance of that, to the point where some people will know that some people have left the business because they weren't good at collaboration with other functions. And those acts, which you could consider symbolic, the word gets out that it's really not tolerated. On a more positive note, there is always that kind of, we're one team. One of the typical things is global local marketing, right? I only ever have calls with the total end-to-end marketing organization because nothing else matters. We do nothing without each other. And then on KPIs, I try to align them as much as possible. My team has joint accountability for the P&L of the major brands. Now, my global team could easily say, Sil, this is so unfair. My objectives are basically set by what the markets put in their plan and the roll-up of that. And, and so I don't have total control over that. Maybe they're not executing well. Well, I could nod sympathetically and, really, and but what I do say is, listen, if you're not influencing those market objectives, it's a failure to influence. Nobody ever really wants to hear the failure to influence phrase from me. And secondly, it's sort of, no, I would rather have the objectives feel a bit unfair than have a different objective for global than for markets. Because I think that this thing over what you have control over is a bit of a myth. We have control over nothing. The market circumstances, earthquakes, political unrest, voting obstruction, all of that can happen at any time. So let's align our KPIs, let's talk about collaboration, and let's just get on with it.
Great. Thanks, Sil. And John?
I think the key thing for us is that it's not just collaboration between people doing the same sort of thing. We've got creative folks, we've got consulting folks, we've got technology folks, and you've got to get a collaboration collective going on. And I think that's where the leadership roles come out. People raise their eyebrows at me. I mean, sometimes our KPIs are extraordinarily individualistic, which is really tough when you're trying to run a collaboration business, but I'll get on to that in due course. But in the meantime, you've got to lead from the front. And I love that point. Just reach into the machine and praise people and reinforce good behavior when you see it. And actually, and I do like the point you made, if people aren't behaving, no matter in line with the values, no matter how commercially valuable they may be, I think there have to be consequences. Because I think if folks see that people can play games and get away with it, that undermines collaboration more than anything else. And I think you've just, as a leader, you've got to be brave enough to reach in and say values trump commerce every time, to misquote a famous phrase.
Very good. Thanks, John. So it's getting very hot. I'm going to ask one last question, and then I think we're all probably ready for some refreshments. So otherwise we'll wilt. So last question. So we talked about the future of marketing and where it's going. So if you've got a new grad thinking about going into marketing right now, very different world than it was, just very quickly, would you advise them, yes, do it, no, don't, and why? So what would you say?
What could be possibly better than marketing today? Honestly, it's so diverse. It's so challenging. It's, in my mind, the engine of growth for most companies. I can't imagine anything better. Both my kids have gone into marketing. There was no pressure for them to do it, but I think they saw the light.
Very good.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say go for it. It's an exciting sector. It's ever changing. It continues to be dynamic. It's creative. It is at the heart of organization, or it should be. It's driving growth. So I would say absolutely.
Very good.
Absolutely. There has never been a better time to be a marketer. In fact, I'm really envious of the folks who are starting out now. Because actually, back in '84, when I started out, you could have all these wonderful ideas, but it was really hard to instantiate them. Now, they've got hopefully a 30-year career just really, really knocking it out of the park. So absolutely, go for it.
Thank you all. So fantastic discussion. Thank you to our colleagues at Accenture Interactive for hosting us. And will you please join me and give a huge thanks to our fantastic panelists.
Thank you, Mari.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mari. Very good.
So we finished.